Namaste. Okay, welcome. So we're going to expand on something that we weren't able to fully come to in the intensive on Saturday. Because it's happening to quite a few people who are with me, and I feel that the listening is there. But one thing I want to say about this is third stage going to seem really alien to most people. 80-90% of people are not going to understand the third stage because what we know of spirituality is mostly second stage. Now, we've heard stories of people having third stage experiences where universal forces are happening for them, but it's like the technology of it or the specificness of it that would allow you to begin to recognize these working in yourselves. I don't know if it has been given sufficient clarity, but I do want to say to those of you who might be listening to this that do not be disturbed. This. Be curious. Be curious about what I'm speaking of. It's just information. It really doesn't have a relevance until it's happening for you. But for some of you, it is happening and you don't know, you can't recognize that it is happening. And it can be quite disturbing if you don't have a paradigm, a way of holding the third stage experiences, because these are the universal forces. They are spoken about in the Bhagavad Gita, starting in the 8th chapter, but really the 9th chapter is when they begin to show themselves. And the Mother Book, and I'll quote from the Mother Book tonight to speak to it, where you're beginning introduced to Sri Aurobindo's description, very accurate description, although he's cognified it in a particular way, of the universal forces that are governing this existence, of which we are, each of us, our bodies, are the arena where these universal forces work themselves out. And that we have something to do with it. That us, the individual I amness principle that we are, free of all codings, derives its authority from the Supreme Being. And within us, we have a piece of this authority. This is what the soul is. It's a piece of that essential quality that allows us to be self-aware, to be conscious, to have awareness, to have will, to have choice. All of that is derived from the radiance of that principle of I amness that derives from the Sat, the original principle, potentiality that's out of existence, but which allows all of existence, includes all of existence. So each of us can become the collaborator or the opponent to these universal forces when they start occurring. So our ordinary human intellect can actually become the means by which we can consciously align and collaborate when these universal forces start working in us, rather than to be in resistance or fear or thinking you're going crazy or something is terribly wrong when they start showing themselves, which would be otherwise the case from the individual point of view. These forces are so powerful and so impactful that dramatic. They're going to be not something you can avoid or hide from or pretend didn't exist. You have to address them. If you have the right information, so much an important part of my teachings, just to have the right information can prepare you for when they show themselves, so you can say, this is grace. This is not something terrible. That this is a showing of something I never knew could exist. I met this at the night of my awakening, January 4th, 1998. That was when the third plane opened up. I had been unwittingly living in the second stage, but it wasn't until the third stage opened up and had traveled some distance before I recognized that I had already traveled the second stage. Okay, so Satya, you had a question, bringing you back. around this that I thought.
Darn.
Yeah.
All right. So we were talking about third stage, fourth stage.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So the question I had is, so I've been moving in through the third stage. Is that what we were talking about?
Mm-hmm.
For about 3 years. So it doesn't necessarily happen like that. So it started showing up as really deep states the same time every day. So around 3 o'clock, if I don't have anything to do, I'm out for 2 hours or more. And then it's just progressively gotten stronger and stronger. So on our way over here, we had a conversation. This is not it, but it is a showing of it. So exactly what is it a showing of?
That there are universal forces that are purposefully vigorous in the collective consciousness, that are interested in each of us and becoming conscious of what our true nature is. So it's introducing us to our universal true nature.
Okay, so I have more question then. So I'm out. I'm in samadhi. There's nobody at home. So the only experience I have is the going into it where it's just so overwhelming I can't function. And then the coming out of it, which I'm totally out of it for a while. So where in there is...
Well, yes, because at this stage, it's like the caterpillar dissolving in the cocoon. There's no way of holding it. I mean, you could say it's not bad. It's not a terrible experience. It's actually quite compelling. It's quite wonderful, right? Would you say it was? How would you describe it in terms of like a bad experience and a good experience?
Compelling.
Compelling.
Yeah.
Okay. It's a compelling falling into a quality of being that's so different than what you've been able to know as an individual that you can't find a way of holding it or understanding it or languaging it. So if a caterpillar had an identity, it would lose that organizing principle of a caterpillar as all the cells of its body dissolve into this unfolding natural process, by the way, unfolding natural process. And the third stage is an unfolding natural process, where in the second stage, we're collaborating with it consciously and we're making it happen and we're keeping up our practices and we're wanting this state or that state, the enlightenment or the bliss or the Shakti or whatever it is, the love. But in this stage, the universe says, child, let me scoop you up and take you to what you are. And that's what happened to me. I was scooped up, and that's what is happening to many of us. All right, not many, but 6 to 10 people are currently at various stages, and some are in the acute stage. And I'll try to describe this third stage because these are the universal forces. They are every human being, and the entire drama of the individual ego, the individual human being, is acting out in a small stage these titanic forces that exist in the third stage, in the universal forces. So this is not alien into my teachings. So I'm going to just share a few so that you can find a reference point in the particular case, the mother book. This is on page 35 in the little blue book. And it's talking about the Mahashakti. That's the beginning before she starts talking about the various aspects of the mother. I'm sure Armindo's talking about this. These emanations are the many divine forces and personalities in which men have worshipped her under different names throughout the ages. But also she prepares and shapes through these powers and their emanations the minds and bodies of her beauties, even as she prepares and shapes the minds and bodies for the beauties of the Ishwara, that she may manifest in the physical world in the disguise of the human consciousness some ray of her power and quality and presence. So each of us have our own unique frequency that is aligned with this overall principle that's seeking to manifest its true nature into existence through each human being. Human beings are the only ones who this happens to. It is only through our form that we have the complexity and capacity to be able to be converted into a vessel for these forces to find their expression. And they will always enter into our individual humanity according to the channels or pathways that we have developed this life. And this life, of course, may be the consequence of many lives. But this life is where it determines the success or the effectiveness of these forces when they enter. So when I had the second, the week after my awakening, and this unbelievable love, bliss, energy came into my body, it was completely recognizable that this was a divine being that had fallen in love with me and wanted to play with me. That was it. It was like, oh my God, this is a real thing. I mean, this is a consciousness. I don't know how fully self-aware, but an intentional consciousness that's coming into my form and introducing itself in this way. And it went on for 6 hours. And there was a time in there when I said, hey, enough's enough, this is great, but, and there are people with me right now where this is happening. It's pretty much having to try to surrender to this completely overwhelming, much larger than yourself force that at the same time is so intimate, so personal, so trustworthy, so loving, so vast and so total in its acceptance and love of us that nothing can compare from our human experience. They're just our little human loves are just like flickers or drops in the cup versus the ocean. So it's probably, it isn't even an ocean. It's just a bigger cup than us, which we then grow into the capacity to meet it. And then the next piece of the ocean comes, and even a bigger force will come in as we learn to collaborate with this process. So this is the effort in the third stage, is our conscious collaborating, our conscious willingness to let it happen. Now, the individual human being not only carries divine forces, it carries undivine forces. So when they come in, even though that they're benign in their origin, they may push up in us our little particular piece of the universal darkness. Every human being is a battlefield of titanic forces. It's the stage by which these titanic forces work themselves out between each of us and with all of us. We see this play every day when we read the news. There are titanic forces of divine, undivine forces that are at work. So when these universal forces come in, any aspect of the undivine forces we haven't met in ourselves, and any link we may have wittingly or unwittingly to their universal aspects will also be brought up. And we discover, compulsive behavior and irrational behavior and dark forces of anger and rage or irritability and dissatisfaction as this benign force comes in and starts waging war with the undivine forces that you are unconsciously or unwittingly linked with through your programming, through your ancestral karma, through your piece of the collective error. So it can be quite a battlefield, much different than the battlefield of the second stage, which is also a battlefield, which is where the awakened self is trying to continue to expand in its awakening, coming out of its embodiment. It's a different type of battlefield where you are sort of like the Folsom being thrown this way and that way by these forces of which you have your own individual piece of aspect that you would be familiar with. So the danger in this is you don't recognize that these are universal forces that are at work, and you take it personally. And you start feeling, I am evil. I am the darkness. And that's what happened to me just before my awakening. Before my awakening, I was the evil. I was the cruelty. I was the Nazi. I was the awful person. Was the introduction to the divine force that followed. But others, it's a divine force, and then we meet the Nazi afterwards. So it can come in any of these ways as they introduce themselves. In time, you get, because it keeps going on. Now, not everybody will it be able to establish itself to continue to unfold. We have to have done lifetimes of work at the individual level, at the human level, at the awakened level, the first and second stages, to really be able to allow these forces to come in and establish themselves. So one of the great obstacles is tamas, and the second great obstacle is rajas. That these two forces, wherever parts of our mind, vital, or body, where they still ruling, these are the parts that will expel this force or misinterpret it and take it personally. So the rajas lays claim and greed and action and power. And the tamas goes into reaction, resistance, opposition, denial. So these are the forces that will not allow, when the universal forces come to establish themselves, it will pull away. It will say, oh, not ready yet. And then you have to wait. You wait until the cycles of life and your cycles coincide enough that the universals come in, or by grace, you meet a guru, someone who has gone through these three stages. Most spiritual teachers teach from the third stage. They don't descend all the way down into the second or the first. So you don't get the information, you don't get the sense of what is the opportunity of a living guru or a realized being, maybe consciously. You just find yourself being dragged this way and that way. But I'm here to bring it all the way down so, like the Gita, you have a correct understanding. This isn't something I do. It is something that happens. There are rules and structures of and parameters that determine the unfolding of this development of ourselves as the Supreme Being who has forgotten themselves, recovering themselves. And this is an endless unfolding process that occurs throughout the world all the time. And many can go through this process and be inarticulate and not even understand what's happened to them. Because they'll come back, as long as they're in a body, they'll come back to some quantum of ordinary humanness, even though this is still going on. But they carry this effectiveness to impact the world around them and the people who meet them. That is beyond anything that perhaps they could say. So many of the great realized beings were inarticulate. Only some were able to bring it down so it could become a teaching like Buddha or Jesus, which really, Jesus didn't really bring a teaching, but his particular mission was very embodied. Right? Jesus' purpose was a demonstration of physical sacrifice. And he came because the world was bound by the physical. And the only way you can transform the physical is through this pain, through this suffering, through this being eaten by lions, whatever, be crucified on the cross. So he was the demonstration of that teaching. But that was only for that time. This time it's different. This time, the collective consciousness forces are much more benign. They're much more aligned. There's much more possibility for these third dimension forces to come in. And it's my observation that because of civilization and because of education and because of morality and because of ethics and because of standards of conduct that is required by civilization, the world consciousness has been unconsciously being trained in a yoga of its own sort. People have had to restrain the primitive aspects of their nature in the collective consciousness much more. So there's many more people who have this ability to hold these universal forces. That's why awakenings are occurring everywhere like they are, even at the second stage. All the scenes of the earth play have been like a drama, arranged and planned and staged by her, with the cosmic gods as her assistants and herself as a veiled actor. So are we a vibhuti? What's the difference between being a ray and being a vibhuti? A vibhuti means that you are to be a channel, an instrument of that particular stream or multiple streams of this multifaceted expression of universal forces, right? There is the infinite, still, wise presence. These are, by the way, Sri Aurobindo uses the word she or the mother, but this is men and women. This is the entire principle that brings us all into existence. This is Krishna. This is Vishnu. This is all the divine principles of the feminine and the masculine. So don't be confused by the language, because we all ultimately, as we develop in the third stage, carry the potential of becoming a vibhuti, a channel for these divine force embodied as you. You can also, in the process of being an instrument or a channel for this particular channel, open your system up so that you can actually prepare yourself for the fourth stage. So this is quite important to understand, is that even when one has become what we would say a realized teacher, a teacher of great might, if they are not able to pass through this stage, they will always be in a worship orientation to their supreme nature. So their individual I amness is not yet big enough to recognize that even this force is an expression, a small expression of you, as the Bhagavad Gita points to. The revelation of the 11th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, the Vishwarupa, was Arjuna being introduced to the concept that he was the supreme being. And of course, that completes in the 15th chapter, where it is, I am all of this. And to cut away that which remains, that still obscures or separates you from that truth establishing itself. So these are extraordinary next steps for a few relative to the mass of people on the planet. If you can even conceptualize or begin to be curious about what I'm speaking of, you can begin to open up that possibility so that when this may happen to you, there will be some piece of knowingness, some piece of information that would say, oh, this is purposeful. This is actually serving something greater. That is the key. The key for how to hold the journey, both from the very beginning, that your human life was purposeful, that your awakening was purposeful, and the unfolding of these divine forces are also purposeful, is the thing to hang on to. So that no matter what arises, no matter how horrific or how wonderful, it's all a showing of that purpose in different ways. An unfolding that, in fact, in my experience, is endless, but we, the occupying consciousness of the individual form, gets used to it, gets oriented to how to operate and what is that purpose, and then almost automatically becomes a channel or instrument for that purpose to manifest. The more we can align ourselves, our outer lives, with that inner unfolding, the more we can find the language, the more we can find a way of how it works, how it expresses. Some people just stand in front of the room and they're the radiance, or they're the channel. Some people don't speak at all. Mary Baba didn't speak at all. There was this overwhelming power in the presence. Ramakrishna, when he spoke, it was mostly ecstatic statements. It wasn't until years later that Ramakrishna could actually be specific, and he did so to train his students, who all became teachers in their own right. It is the nature of learning how to align yourself with your own unique expression. But interimly, these forces overtake our sense of individual identity. They expand us into that great divine and introduce us to the undivine. And it's my experience that we're often introduced to the undivine more or less, depending upon how much we met it in our human life and how much we met it in our awakening process. This is why most of my work is preparing all of you to meet your unmet parts, to find the darkness, to find the obscurity, and to find it in your body, because it's only there within the cells and of the blood and the guts and the bone that these structures can be fully met. These are primal, primitive, id-like forces that come and is what brought consciousness into life and is the basis of our human bodies. Now, our bodies have become refined over the thousands of years of the evolution as we've come out of being cavemen or women or tribal or villages or, early civilization and so on and so forth. It has evolved. Our body is more refined, more capable than bodies 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago. So the depth of darkness we have to meet is not the same depth that the early awakened beings had to meet. They've made the space for this to be a more effortless process, relatively speaking. But it doesn't mean there isn't effort. Because what you'll do, the biggest difficulty on the greater stages is that just like there was dejection in the second stage, there is huge dejection in the third stage, where you could mistake that what's coming up with you is yours, like personally yours, like you are evil, or you are deluded, or you are impossible, or you could never love, and get overtaken by the negative pattern in your system. Of course, it won't last because it's introducing it to this expanding consciousness you are, which will ultimately convert it into truth. The undivine will ultimately be converted into truth, divine. And even that word divine is not adequate, because in the journey as we develop as human beings, is you might say that the divine and undivine is way out here. When we awaken, our ability to be with the undivine is more like here. And as you develop in the second stage, the separation between the dark and the light in you becomes less and less. In the third stage, this completes itself. It takes you to the process where both the divine and the undivine forces can actually be there concurrently. And it's in this melding of the darkness and the light that pushes us into the fourth stage, where both the darkness and the light are us. We are the dark. We are the light. And we're that which is beyond both darkness and light. We're that which is both divine and divine. And that they all are instruments and channels of you. Not some divine mother principle, not some God principle. They're all instruments of channels of you. Now, it sounds pretty heady, right? Little human ego would like say, hey, you mean ruler of the universe? I could do that. No, you couldn't. Because even if you get a little bit of the third stage and you get a little bit of the divine power, you'll also get a little bit of the undivine power. And those titanic forces are going to play with you. And you're going to unwittingly thinking you're that or you're that. And the dark force in the third stage is always power. And the dark force, well, it'll also be power. At the lower stages, it'll be seduction. It'll be bliss, an addiction to sensual, physical, material indulgence. And the indulgence is unspeakable, knows no bounds. It eats only newborn children for dinner. It is, it takes on a quality way beyond us little human beings would be able to tolerate. And you get to meet these. You get to get friendly, go into relationship with these parts of yourself and not be tricked, not take station, not say, okay, in this power where I've got this much control, it could be 1/3 of what's possible. And because in that, you can actually have when the two come together, be destroyed as an individual. Remember how we talked about it? where the dark and then part resolve, but there's no ego left to enjoy it. There's no I amness left. It goes back into that one. So this is the danger of the third stage, is it brings not only great love, it brings this great power, which comes with the truth of the recognition and freedom. By the way, if you ever notice that when you have an awakened experience, there's this quality of freedom, and with that quality of freedom comes a sense of power. And if the ego has used, the human, undeveloped, immature human ego has used power to serve its self-interest, or in the awakened stage, at some stage took on teaching roles and used whatever little piece of power is available on the second stage, then they could be very much overtaken by this sense of I am that, I am all. And the quality of it is it will create chaos. It will ultimately create chaos. It will be very attractive, but it'll create chaos because the forces have not been resolved. They're still in matter of fact, when the dark and light is separate enough, the light can pretend the dark doesn't exist. It can ignore the dark. But when you awaken, you can't ignore it as much. But in the third stage, you can't ignore it at all. It'll be hammering on the door. If you're in the dark, the light will be showing. And if you're in the light, the dark will be showing. At that stage, the imbalance is actually greater because there is no longer ability to deny or resist or oppose it, which is part of the human individual will. So then you get to meet the titanic forces, and you will inevitably meet this as you traverse the third stages. The third stage, inevitably, it's the only way. If you're going to traverse it, you'll have to meet it. I certainly traversed it. The reason I was able to traverse it is I had a teacher who had completely traversed it. That's the only reason. And this is why to traverse from second into the third and to be able to have a hope of traversing the third stage, you need a realized teacher to secure your passage. And that realized teacher may protect you by keeping you obscured in your human or awakened state and have them serve them in his or her work as a means of carrying you beyond that third stage so you don't have to go through it. Now, most don't want that because if you get a taste of it, you say, oh no, I want more of that. I don't want to miss it all, you know. So you get to swim in those waters and experience the whole process. And in many ways, this can actually make you into a world teacher, into a teacher that can impact the whole world if you can succeed in traversing it. The other thing that can happen is if you traverse the third stage and come to the absolute, which I'll talk about in a bit, you can come back through the third stage and begin and experience everything without being overtaken by it. So it's actually the safer route, is to traverse the third stage and come to the fourth stage. And then, if needed, depending upon your individual design, your individual role, in terms of the remaining time in your body, you can come through these stages and then manifest accordingly. And you'll manifest along the channels that were natural for your system. Some are going to be more loving. Some are going to be more challenging. They're going to use truth. Some will use more love. Some will use some mixes and variations of the two. Fourth stage, then. For me, it didn't occur until start in 2004 with the samadhis. That was the start of it. They were compelling, like Satyamaya shares, extremely compelling. Like all of these preparatory third stage movements, they're very compelling, and the world falls away. And you can usually tell they're coming because you lose pull. You know, food doesn't interest you, doing anything doesn't interest. All the senses, consciousness pulls away from the outer world and collapses into itself as it does in meditation. But now the collapse is not in your control. It overtakes you at times. And it tucks you into these deep, profound, compelling states. And this is the preparation. This is what gives you the early sign that these are coming. So for me, the nature of how compelling are these early samadhis is this deepens. It deepens from 2 hours, like Satyamaya is sharing, to 4 hours, to 6 hours. They're actually distinct stages. The 6 hours probably could have gone longer, but usually around the 6-hour stage, whatever is remaining in the human designed person, in my case it was Rajas, will need action in order to deepen. It will need vigorous action, more vigorous than normal, where there is challenge, where there is a mighty purpose. And in that stage, then in that full engagement, you start burning out the remaining rajas in your system so that it can, the next surge comes in and it's 8 hours, 12 hours, 24 hours, 36 hours, 2.5, 3 days, ultimately, is what I experienced. And this went on for 2.5 years. So this process is where the system is being prepared to know its supreme nature. And it completed for me in 2007 at the level of my personhood, because that whole process, by the way, which you can know nothing while you're in these compelling stages, or very little. But after a while, after years and years, you get familiar with it. And they start giving you a sense of direction or purposefulness. And you notice how they change your ordinary life and how different you are from how you were before. These can be quite dramatic in terms of how fundamental is your relationship with existence. But in that Guru Purnimam Day 2007, it was the recognition, what I could get in my human form is, oh, I'm all of it. I'm the darkness, I am the light. I'm the Kali, and I am the Lakshmi. I am the destroyer, and I am the creator. I am every one of them, and of course, I couldn't be anything else, and neither could any of us, nor could any other human being anything else. We are that, like so ordinary, so that all doubt, all need, all aspiration, all having it be any, just gone forever, just gone. And then it was just about, okay, what do I do with this? Took 2 years to actually get organized enough to be able to be an inhabited embodiment of the Supreme Being and figure out how to bring this into existence. And that was the knocking around that I've shared before, the formation of New Dharma, and then the beginning of this teaching work, and so on and so forth. Of course, what I am as a Supreme Being can only be manifested in fragments of my speech, although something of the force can come through my speech, or in fragments of my ability to organize or be able to be effective in my relationships with people, or any of these other things. These all are human in the ability to bring what comes when these forces converge and complete. So there's the manifestation. This ability to bring it into the body is also proportional to how fully we've been able to complete our development as an individual human being, the darkness that we picked up and took on in this life that we carried, and how fully we were able to allow for our realization to come to its completion. Okay. So I don't know if I've been able to successfully communicate the whole thing, but I feel I'm pointing to it. Your purpose is to become a manifesting instrument of the Supreme Being in whatever is going to be your unique expression of that. This is way beyond normal human Dharma. This is way beyond normal spiritual Dharma. This is a fundamental principle of the ancient archetypal structures that were there in the creation, seeking an opportunity to manifest itself in existence. And it will always be through you, through each of us. Okay, yes, so now we're ready for questions. And looks like
20 minutes.
All right, Sharon, come on forward. Grab the mic, Sharon, or get it from Tom. Sharon, behind you. Woo.
quick one.
Yeah.
I'm just realizing that before I came to Washoe, I had a few of these periodically. But now that I've been here at Sydney, it was 3 hours almost every day.
Got it.
Now at Ethan, the darkened windows at Sydney really helped. Because after meditation, I would go back and then they were so dark.
Yeah.
So now they're just beginning again about the last 2 to 3 weeks. And I'm finally able to articulate this one part of it. It's the body that's going into samadhi for me.
Oh, yes.
The mind. Today, I was out in meditation and I could hear everything going on. And I think, oh, wow, that's interesting. The things going across the floor. But the body couldn't move.
Right. Yes. So it means your body is able to receive it more effectively than the mind.
Wow.
So, but the mind loses its normal way of knowing. You know, in the Gita, it's the 9th chapter where it talks about direct knowing, the ability to know without thinking, this immediacy. So there's a knowing now that includes all the little information that your mind is, but it's not thinking. It's just, something's moving.
Mm-hmm.
You know, oh, is it something I should worry about? But there's no link to being able to take action.
Right. There's
no link to the vital reaction that would otherwise occur. You know, the unexpected noise. There's no being disturbed out of it. And that is the samadhi. That's the nature of the samadhi. And over years, what will happen is, if situations are favorable, this will deepen and deepen until it will be what happened for me, which is when I would go in until I came out, there was no time at all.
That happens at periods of time. That happens different times.
Okay, good.
So
that's the same where.
But then I don't know what's happening. So
you don't know anything,
right? But the body one I know.
Yes,
I'm aware of.
Yes. Okay. Well, then the body rides the journey. The body is the one who ultimately carries the supreme being. Everything else in our system is not capable. In a living, embodied existence, the bones will know, the blood will know, the guts will know. The fabric of your human physicality will know, but everything else will have been superseded. Emotions, mind, sensation, the whole evaluation of world and who I am and what's happening will have been opaque, like a movie. When you're watching a movie and the projector gets stuck. I don't know if it happens anymore because almost everybody has digital. You miss a great aspect about reality. But when I was a projectionist, when I was about 16 years old, it happened fairly regularly because we got the leftover movies. So they were always breaking. And you would be watching the movie and then the scene would stop and then it would become so bright. And then it would become just pure white. So this is what samadhi is. It's the consciousness overtakes the ability to hold an image, to hold a thought, to hold a feeling, to hold a sensation. And that's the nature of the transition through the 3rd stage. It continues in the 4th stage, by the way, but it loses its direction, and it becomes manageable. You have the authority over it. Like for me, I've been able to be functional because I say, okay, you can come this time of the day. And I can tell when it's coming in and when it's trying, and I had to train it because initially I wanted to come in its own rhythm, but I had to train it so I could be functional in the day. And it will, because there's no longer any movement required in the individual consciousness in terms of coming to the truth of what's left of what it is true nature. So excellent.
Mine seems to come at the end of meditation. If we go 5:30 to 7, it'll come in just about 7 o'clock.
Well, then what about just going into your room and continuing the meditation?
That's it. The only thing is going from the barn. I did that at Sydney. It was very close, but going further across to the other, it seems to, well, I can try it.
Yes, because you can actually hold on to it consciously. When the bell rings, you can hold on to that state and then just make the minimum movements. Don't make eye contact with anyone. Just the minimum movements and go into your room and then holding on to that. And then we'll build back up. But it'll take some time to build back up.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, that took about 15, 20 minutes. But the time that most of mine are 3 hours.
Got it. Okay. Well, and perhaps that just happens to be with the nature of the schedule. So It's my experience that though we want to allow this, when this happens, you want to allow it, you also want to have some restraint around it.
Oh, yeah.
Because it'll start disassociating you. You'll start losing your grounding. And that means you start asserting some control over it. Even though it's some compelling, after 2 hours or 3 hours or 4 hours, you want to be able to come back,
Yeah,
and to go into action. So at least certainly at first, we need to not just ride the wave, but actually steer the boat. So we want to assert some restraint over these states, depending upon whatever is the necessity of your environment. So if you're still in the work world, well, there's your necessity. But when someone is heading towards a third stage, I always recommend you simplify your outer life. So the necessity doesn't stop this unfolding from happening, because it will. If you keep very much too vigorous in your outer activity, it will thwart the higher
yes,
stages.
I've seen
But
that.
at some point anyway, whatever is remaining in Rajas will demand to be expressed, and then you're going to have to do it. But it's best at that point to do it in the service of the spiritual teacher. At that point, then you convert all that Rajas to serve divine in the world in whatever ways available to you. Then the Rajas gets burned out, and then the next stage, the next level of totality of the collapse into that truth of what you are can occur. So there are other ways of doing this. There are other ways, but anyway, there's my answer to your.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
And in Nevada City, I know when I had to have work going on, I would say, okay, I can do it till 9 o'clock.
Got it.
And then just
Yeah,
stop,
no.
so.
You've been doing it perfectly.
Okay. Yeah.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, you're done.
Huh? No.
Yes. 10 minutes.
Or we have 10 minutes.
All right, can I do it?
I don't think I tweaked my ankle. Want me to try it?
Yeah. How'd you get into the house?
It just happened when I sat down.
Okay. Just work to it then. Yeah. Yeah, you know
I'm
what I'm
glad.
talking about.
Well, so that's my question, because it feels to me, like I'm not under no illusion about where I am. I see lots of amazing things happening in people just in this room, but I'm also experiencing so much of what you describe.
Yep.
So I would say that more of us than 6 to 10 are in stage 3.
Possibly. I mean, part of it has to do with, this has just been showing itself in the last couple of weeks for me, where I'm seeing this. So for you, it's been there longer. So you're seeing what you're now seeing what's happening now that we're speaking to it too. But yes, it's very true. And of course, this is my work. My work is to.
Yeah, this is what all of us who are so committed in this room and around the world have been hearing all of this from you. And
yes,
I think so many of us are doing this really consciously
yes,
and committedly.
Okay, then very good. I would be glad to be wrong with my ratio.
I think more of us are, and maybe there's, like we're entering as opposed to
yes,
completing.
Yes. Or you're having hints of it from the second stage. There's this transitional zone as we come out of the second stage into the third stage. So
yeah. So that's all I wanted.
All right. Very good. So now you know where it's going to end up. Okay, go ahead. Satya. Okay. And then lead lesson.
I want to share an experience that I had early this week, and it seems to be, I wanted to, shine your light because I was baffled and I still don't know exactly what that was. So I was in the morning meditation in our house, and I believe, she's laughing. One was making fun, the other one was kind of like, wow. And the other was like, oh, do we need anything? But anyway, what happened, I was in Samadhi. I was out. As I'm entering, that's how I can recollect. As I am coming back into my body, there's no I there. I was literally, there was this field of shimmering darkness. And it was coming, I was completely aware of, like, I was the dimension, it was a dimensional place. And that extremely powerful shimmering blackness start descending into my physical body. And it was like, I could feel that force. And it feels that I was more that than this. But as I start meeting the density of my body, I start feeling like really sick, like nausea, like the worst hangover feeling ever, cold sweat. And at some point, I could feel coming all the way into my body, like drops of sweat coming out of my leg. And the pain became so intense that I remember I just lay on my, like, just some support. And after that, I lost consciousness.
How long were you unconscious?
I asked Radha, and she said maybe 10, 15 minutes.
Okay. All right, that's it. That's the Supreme Being entering into your body. So it's the paradox of the dark and light concurrently. So the radiant darkness, the radiant darkness is evidence of the Supreme Being.
Radiant darkness.
Yes.
Yeah.
And as it enters into the body, it is combustion. It's it's like when a star formed, right? Where the gravity overcomes the resistance and it collapses in on itself, and you have fusion. So it's very, very hard for the body to accept it. So you were able to ride it all the way into your toes before you went out.
I feel like the drops
So,
on my shin bones.
Okay,
right?
well, that's where it's going. It's going to just continue in that way. So that is what I'm speaking of. So now this is a Supreme Being manifesting. Of course, she's Satya Priya now. So why wouldn't it manifest? Why wouldn't it manifest? Now the door has been opened, and the consciousness now has a way of holding itself. That's basically saying, I am the Sat. I am that.
So I think I knew at that moment that what happened to me was extraordinary.
Right.
That I could not have was much other people are seeing.
Yeah.
I had that sense. This
Yes,
is
good.
not a small thing.
Yeah, you know it. You've been around long enough. What do you notice? How it's been? Go ahead.
Yeah, but what I noticed, so I mean, at that moment, for several hours after that, I was just feeling like a leaf, so light, like I was totally empty.
Yeah.
And I was in that state. And I had actually a mentoring session that morning, and I'm like, boy, I don't know how this is going to come, but
Good, it's grounding.
Yeah.
It brings it into your
I had no
body.
idea what happened to me that morning.
Yeah. Well, it's good. Arjuna got the kid.
But but what I noticed that, my consciousness have been very identified with my physical body. I think that's why I experience so much pain and discomfort. So the discomfort and the pain is still there, but there is less of a identification of consciousness there.
Yeah, I got it.
So I feel like that. And the other thing that I'm feeling is that, and that happened in our meeting this afternoon. Like, I mean, I see all these extraordinary people, so sharp, so intelligent, come up with such a wonderful plan. And I'm like, blank. I cannot, and they are like, and I'm like in awe of their like capacity. And there's nothing in me that can close the lens.
Not at this point.
So that has been, and I as much as I can try, it just is draining because it's just, I don't have the power to
bring it in yet fully. It's just introduced itself. It can't become a focal, it can't become organized This takes years.
So that's what I'm like. Yeah.
Yeah. But you are more embodied than I have seen you.
I don't feel disembodied. Like when I say
Yeah.
blank, I don't mean transcendent.
Yeah. No.
It's like a blank slate,
Yes. Right.
like a blank
But
page.
you can be an appreciation of their activity.
Oh, totally. I was
Yeah.
like in awe. I'm
Yeah.
like, oh my
And
God.
if you had a greater responsibility, you would have been able to speak to that vibration. You would have been able to find words, but they wouldn't be coming from where they come from usually. They won't be coming from where ordinary people think from. You will be able to language something into the space that will actually move what's trying to happen. So, but you're no longer using the same reference points for how effective or ineffective you are. You can actually get down to very detailed information like I am doing. The more you actually put yourself into situations where you're coming down from the Supreme Being and speaking and interacting and doing things, I am more effective when I'm in that particular zone. I can be powerfully effective in tracking details and keeping track of things and setting things in motion. So part of it has to do with as an individual, you were trained as a scientist, you were trained to focus, you were trained to work with data from multiple places and bring it together and come to conclusions. That will come back.
It feels to me that if it's needed, it will go online.
Yeah.
But like this afternoon, there is nothing that I could do better than what else
Be an
was there. So
appreciation.
then just be space. Like
Yeah.
it seems that
Yeah,
that's
you
the
held
best.
space. You actually held space.
All that I can
Yeah.
do.
And that's all you need to do then.
Okay.
All right, my dear.
Thank you.
All right. There's a lot of material just opened up there. And I'm sure we could go on with this because perhaps you're right. This is really what I bring that's unique is the third stage work. So, but we'll see how this expands. We're going to have another talk on Thursday and another on Saturday. We'll see what shape needs to unfold before we leave for Europe.
Oh, are you making Thursday public?
Yeah, we could.
Yeah. If you're going to talk about this, you should make it public.
Okay. All right. For those of you listening, tune in on Thursday, 7 o'clock Pacific Daylight Time. All right. So we're going to finish with the meditation. Hari Om Tat Sat. Hari Om Tat Sat. Hari Om Tat Sat Shri Buddha.